Welcome to the Farm to Fork Soundbites mini-series. We're joining you live from the Rabobank Farm to Fork conference in Sydney on the 23rd of March, and we're here to share with you some of the key themes and insights from throughout the day. G'day, my name's Angus Gidley-Baird. I'm the Senior Animal Proteins Analyst with Rabo Research based in Sydney, and I'm joined by Pia Piggott, our Horticultural Analyst, also based in Sydney. How are you going, Pia?
I'm very well, very excited to be at Farm to Fork finally.
It is. Now, we just sat through a session and it was titled Supply Chain Trends and the Role of Tech. We're going to go back to what we heard there and pull out a couple of the key points that really resonated with us. But just generally, before we kick off, we're in lunch hour. How do you think the day's going so far, Pia?
Yeah, it's going really well. We've had such an array of different speakers directly from their farms or all the way to big corporates and some from Rabo Research as well. So had really great speakers and lots of different insights on being on the journey together.
Yep. And the session that we covered had three main sort of parts, didn't it? Do you want to run through who the key speakers were?
Yes. So Nick Faraday facilitated the discussion today. He's our Executive Director for Food and Consumer Trends at Rabo Research. And then we had a panelists of Sarah Hazelwood from Woolworths, Mark Wine from Balance Agri in New Zealand, Lucy McDonald from Middlehurst Station in New Zealand, Mark Ryan from Tassel, and Andrew Fletcher from Fonterra.
Brilliant. And we also had a couple of other speakers in that session too. We had Jay Clark from Woodhaven Gardens in New Zealand, and also Chris Fitzgerald showcasing the bionic glove. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's go back to Nick and the panel session. When Nick kicked off, he highlighted 5 key themes: permacrisis, inflation, consumer resilience, big food, and sales of vegetating.
Yes. Do you want to explain what that means, Gus?
We won't go into all of them, but as the animal proteins analyst, you've got to pick up on the sales of vegetating. It was just a basic comment how plant-based foods sales had been static or declining over the last couple of years. So they were a couple of key themes that he picked up. I thought there were a couple of interesting questions that he put to the panel, and it was interesting because of the answers by those different people that represented different parts of the supply chain. So one of the questions was, how would you describe the supply chain? And he put that to each panelist in one word, exactly. So there were some interesting words that came up there.
Yeah, so we had erratic, challenged, volatile, curious, and stressed. So a lot of key themes, especially around that volatility with the past 3 years of COVID and geopolitics, is definitely playing into supply chains. And that was a common theme throughout all of the panelists.
There was also a quick joke. It was great to see. It was always great to see a bit of humour in these things. But I think they described challenging as often described as a 4-letter word when you talk about it in terms of the people in supply chains. But the other thing, and one of the really interesting questions, and this is where we'll draw it out a little bit more, because I was particularly interested in the commonality of the responses that we saw across all those different people in the supply chain. The question was asked, how do you remain relevant? So we've got people at the input side of the supply chain, and we've got people that have got the direct relationship with the consumer at the other end. And we're talking about things like sustainability in particular. What did you get out of that sort of session there, Pia, on how you remain relevant?
I thought it was really interesting how across the supply chain, a key theme was to have consumers at the front of mind. It wasn't just for the large supermarkets or, the direct-to-consumer businesses, but it was for something like Balance Agri. So they were also really committed to looking at what consumers are thinking about when it comes to sustainability, for example.
Yeah, and that was an interesting point made by one of the panelists that said, understand what the value is for the consumer, not just what the company sees as value. And I think they used the example of using biodegradable bags for fertilizer, saying, well, that would be of great value for the company, but it wasn't going to resonate with the consumer. They needed to do something that addressed the emissions in their program. So that was one interesting thing. The other word, collaboration, came up a lot. We often hear everyone sort of citing collaboration, but I thought that was interesting that everyone in the supply chain was saying collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. It was all about, it's sustainability is such a huge space, and with collaboration, they can learn from others. They can prioritize what projects they're working on, and they're not waiting for the magical solution to arrive. They're choosing progress over perfection.
Yeah, and the fact that you've got the input supplier, the farming operator, the manufacturer, the retail contact, all saying collaboration. I think I don't know. To me, it was quite reassuring because it wasn't just one part of the supply chain saying we need to collaborate. Everyone was saying we need to collaborate, which I think at the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to really solve this is everyone working together because it's got to be worked through the supply chain. There were a couple of other comments around, how do you remain relevant, but also how do you tackle some of these problems? Elephants came up.
Yeah, so one of the quotes was, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So in terms of sustainability, there's just such an array of parts of that. And, to really be able to tackle that challenge head on, you need to have some clarity and have some direction in what you're looking to for your business to tackle that whole big monster.
Yeah, and there was some commentary around setting your objective, getting an idea, and then working through that one bit at a time. Because, as you say, there is so much information that is out there on this, and you can easily get overwhelmed by the volume out there. You don't know where to start. But by being a little bit clear on what you want to try and achieve, that helps narrow it down, gives you a bit more focus, and allows you to sort of get through some of the information that is out there.
Yeah, it's a very noisy space, as one of the panelists called it.
Very, very noisy indeed. It was yeah. And the other thing, and this was probably a pickup from one of our earlier speakers, but again, it sort of flowed through into the same thing here. Change and challenge. How you can change, and this might be a good lead into to Jay's presentation for Woodhaven Gardens, but that idea of leading change and creating the dust, not eating the dust. I think we can all sort of sit and wait for things to happen, but it's going to be those that take the first steps that are either going to be they're going to get the biggest rewards, but they're also going to be in the best position to manage some of these changes that are coming through. And often if you have the opportunity to proactively go into something, it allows you the ability to manage it into your environment rather than necessarily having someone impose a requirement on top of you. So I thought that was interesting that they were all quite proactive in the way they approached it, saying, yes, it's a massive topic. Yes, there's a lot of information out there, but hey, we need to start thinking about it. We need to work together about it, and we need to sort of look to find solutions for these problems.
Yeah, I really like Jay from Woodhaven Gardens talk because it was very holistic in terms of sustainability. He talked a lot about his staff and how he treats his staff and their program around sustainability not being just the environment, but people and the economy. So I thought that was really good and also quite community guided.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of their initiatives were focused on the community.
Yeah, and he made the point about providing fresh food at some of the bus shelters in some of the less privileged areas of New Zealand. So really community focused. Yet at the same time, no doubt running a very very good business. I picked up from him one quote. He said, "Don't farm today the same as yesterday, just because that was the way it was done. Try new things, run trials, start with small things. You'll know what makes your business tick. You've got to figure that out for yourself. There's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution, but you've got to start sort of stepping into the unknown a little bit and trying a few things." And yeah, he was quite a breath of fresh air, wasn't he? Quite, as you say, very community. He spoke a lot about his staff and the diversity that they've got there, but also the community. And unfortunately, he probably had a presentation that could have gone for an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was condensed into the short 20 minutes, but also talking about the environmental impacts and how they work through those things as well.
Yeah, and it was very farmer focused. It was from a farmer's perspective, which I think a lot of our clients here really appreciated.
There was one other message before we get to the robotic arm, the bionic arm, which in itself was amazing. But one other message I picked up from him was he mentioned briefly in that sustainability space and that emissions space around premium. And he said not everyone can access the top percentage of consumers that are actually willing to pay for this. We need to find solutions that can work into maintaining our costs, so not increasing the cost for that consumer, because there is a large part of the market out there, and he said fresh food is an essential part of life.
Exactly.
If we as or as our listeners, as producers and farmers out there, our biggest ambition is obviously providing sustainable food for the population. And if we start making it cost prohibitive for them to actually access that, you wonder where we're putting ourselves in that consumer mind. So I thought that was quite interesting. It was going back to his community sort of social, we've got to make sure that we can still provide this in a realistic cost environment for that consumer.
Yeah, another key theme from his speech was about regulation being workable. And I think that was really interesting because of a lot of the advancements we've seen in regulation from New Zealand. He was talking a lot about how if the regulation becomes so far-fetched that nothing will be achieved because it's not working with the people who need to work with it the most.
So, the bionic glove. Now, this is something that is being done. AMPC, the Australian Meat Processor Corporation's investing in research, looking at technology, physical technology to assist in meat processing. And we got a demonstration on the bionic glove. Pip Courtney, our host, was asked up on stage. She put the glove on and showed how it worked in terms of replicating her movements, but enhancing the strength and gripability.
Yeah, I thought it was really great idea of taking the sustainability lens in terms of people because, this technology could really improve and support people who have been working a lot of manual labour jobs. It was really geared towards. So I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, and you just wonder. I mean, this is being developed for the meat processing industry. You wonder what other applications are out there and how they can be applied. A lot of manual labour involved in agriculture, and Pip made the comment. It gave her an ability to grip things in a much stronger way than she physically could. Does it actually improve the ability to tap into a much wider labour base, for example, because those people that may not have the physical capacity to do something suddenly become enabled by this technology.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what was really interesting is a lot of manual labour isn't always ergonomically designed. So this is a really positive solution to that so that, they can support people who are in those roles to help them with their work.
Yeah, I couldn't help but sit there and think of what other applications it could be in, but the whole concept of Iron Man and the Marvel comics came floating back into superhuman strength, and suddenly you can crush single buildings. No, you leap single buildings in single bounds, don't you? I can't even think of what they're talking about. But anyway, no, it was a really great session, I thought. Very interesting. As we mentioned, they have broken for lunch. We are going back. We're doing more this afternoon. There'll be a couple more podcasts that come out around the rest of the content. But it's definitely a wonderful event, Pia. It's great to have you in the podcast studio, the little fishbowl that we're in here, recording this, and great to be able to share it with all those that haven't been able to get here, or if they have, to recap on what some of the events were.
Yeah, it's been great. I'm looking forward to the second half of the day.
Sounds good. Thanks, Pia.
Thank you.